Now, here's a hidden fact about Iraq. This is a secret fact. It's a secret in America. It's a secret on the U.S. media. It's a secret in all the pundit talk shows. It's a secret among our national official leaders. It's never mentioned. But Saddam Hussein was put in power in Iraq by the CIA. He was sponsored by the U.S. His task was to stop the Iraqi Democratic Revolution. And he did that. He destroyed the Kurdish Democratic Party. He destroyed the Iraqi Communist Party, which was a reformist coalition party, coalition building party. He even slaughtered and executed the left wing of his own Ba'athist party. He was Washington's boy. They loved him. They gave him aid. They built those chemical and bacteriological factories that he had in Iraq. That's another secret that you're not told. It was the U.S. that not only knew about this C&B warfare, that's come out in the press. It seems certain U.S. leaders knew that Saddam Hussein had chemical and bacteriological weaponry back during the Iraq-Iran war. They knew about it. Of course they knew about it. They gave it to him. They gave him the technology. That's another secret that's never told. So he was Washington's baby boy. They loved him. Fair-haired boy. Until he got out of line. Until he got out of line on oil prices. Until he started showing himself to be an economic nationalist. He didn't turn Iraq into a comprador client state and say, come on in, boys, it's all yours, take it, any terms you want, pay them any wages you want, don't worry about anything, no public services, none of that stuff, you take what you want on the terms that are totally favorable to you, just make sure you give me something. He didn't do what leaders did in Turkey and other parts of Africa and Latin America and whatever else. Instead, he became an economic nationalist. He started public education programs. He started public health services. Iraq, before 1991, had the highest standard of living in the Middle East. That was destroyed by a president named George Bush, George I. All sorts of reasons have been given by U.S. leaders regarding why we must attack Iraq. Many of those same reasons were given under the reign of George I. When George I decided to attack Iraq, he said, we have to go in because Iraq is threatening to invade Saudi Arabia. That was false. There were no Iraqi troops massing on the Saudi border. Even the U.S. press reported there was no evidence of that. It's got to be pretty blatant when the U.S. press will actually report it, too. Then they said, well, we've got to go into Iraq because they're committing these terrible atrocities against the Kuwaitis. They just took 500 Kuwaiti babies, ripped them out of incubators, and threw them on the hospital floors. Iraqi soldiers laughing and and bayoneting these babies and all that. And some of us sat there and said, 500 incubators in a country with 3 million people. All of Los Angeles County with 14 million people has about 50 incubators in major public hospitals. Wait a minute. Does Iraq specialize in premature babies? What is this? They just happen to have 500 babies. That story too proved to be a total fabrication. Please don't do that. This thing needs it doesn't have it. That story too proved to be a total fabrication. They made all sorts of stories up. There was another reason for going to Iraq. They said, this would create jobs for the economy. I'm not kidding you. Secretary of State at that time under George I, James Baker, said, this war will create jobs. We want to get the Americans interested and hyped up about Iraq. And I thought to myself, well, now George I has been in office for 3 years. He has never evinced any interest in creating jobs for Americans before. Isn't this unusual? And I thought, creating jobs, well, child pornography creates jobs. Auto accidents create jobs. auto accidents are good for the economy. I'm not being funny. I'm not being ironic. I'm being absolutely serious. Auto accidents are a multi-billion-dollar industry. The towers, the wreckers, the mechanics, the emergency health clinic workers, the plastic surgeons, the lawyers, you can go, the state troopers, you could go on and on, the police, the jobs that are created by auto mechanics. It's good for the economy. The point I'm making is that there are many things that might be good for the economy that are bad for human beings. Then in November of 1990, the George I government came up with another reason. A poll had just been taken. I don't think it was even sponsored by the government. It was a private poll taken, national survey poll, Roper or one of those groups. And it said, if Saddam Hussein has nuclear weapons, would you support a military action against him? And that, for the first time, the lukewarm American public went up and said yes. But even then, by the way, even right on the eve of the war, the U.S. public, by overwhelming majorities, preferred negotiated withdrawal of Iraq from Kuwait and negotiated settlement of the conflict rather than committing U.S. forces to that place. Once the forces are committed, then many of my mindless compatriots get up there and rally around the flag and got to support our troops. They're there now. And the flag happens to be wrapped around the president. And there's this eternal menace and external menace and evil. And so we have to back the president for our own security. And that whole dynamic does kick in. Now that was very interesting, that poll. That was seized on by the Bush administration in 1990 as the reason to go after Iraq. And that is the very same reason that got resuscitated just several months ago, isn't it? Right here by George II. We have to go in because Saddam Hussein has weapons of mass destruction. The other reason we have to go in is because linked to Al-Qaeda. Saddam Hussein isn't linked to Al-Qaeda. They are orthodox, fanatical Muslims. Hussein was a secularist. He has a secular state. He wasn't, there are mosques in Iraq, and there's prayers, and they're announced, and there's all that stuff. But they don't love that guy. He doesn't have links to Al-Qaeda. The Bush family has more links to the bin Laden family than